The first fundamental thing to understand about being a healthcare service provider is that you're in a revenue cycle business. Ultimately, what revenue cycle is about, create balance between what I call billing time demand and billing time supply. Really simple concept, very difficult to do.
Robert Kowalick is the managing member and CEO of Revenue Cycle Solutions, LLC, and Ascend Solutions, LLC. He shares insights and strategies to fix broken revenue cycles and boost your practice's success. Let's dive in.
The business started as all of our clients were in the same state, all in Michigan. We worked out of one billing platform. We serviced one specialty, physical therapy with or without combinations of occupational therapy and a little bit of speech therapy. And so having a very homogeneous kind of client base, same state, same specialty, same software, which meant the same state meant same payers. The payer mix didn't vary hardly at all from client to client. And so you would think that with all of that in common, we would have a very common, standard, predictable outcome with trying to help get them paid. What we have found over all these years of quantifying revenue cycle complexities and billing time demand drivers, and then looking at the relationship between billing time supply and billing time demand and measuring outcome based on and correlating the outcome with the balance or imbalance of those two things, we just know that what we really have to understand is time. So here's the really cool thing about billing. This is a fact. Also, just a quick tangent here. Everything that I say in this podcast will be based on data-supported fact. If I say something that's my opinion, this is what I think versus what I know, I will tell you that this is what I think. I can't really know this at this point in time. But everything that I've said and everything that I'm going to say today is 100% proven by millions of claims worth of data over about the last close to 10 years. And this is absolutely fact. So the interesting thing about billing is it's affected by everything in the revenue cycle that's not billing. So let me define all the things in revenue cycle, and every one of these things will be a future episode by itself. So credentialing, right? We all have to be credentialed if we're a provider. I mean, payers won't pay you unless you're credentialed, unless they don't require credentialing. But you can't get paid by Medicare without being credentialed, right? So credentialing process is a revenue cycle function. Authorization management, patient registration, coding, clinical documentation quality, how it supports coding, how it supports medical necessity, the structures that you have, the policies, the rules, the patients themselves, their understanding of patient, their financial responsibilities, the systems that you work in. What's the EMR? What's the billing software? What's the clearinghouse? How is the EMR and the billing software connected to each other? Is that an integrated unified database system? Is that an interface system? EMR and PM are separate systems that are connected together through technology. The payers, your payer mix. Some payers are easy to get paid from. Others are almost impossible to get paid from. All these things. And then billing itself. Billing is a revenue cycle function, right? And all the components of billing, claim submission, payment posting, working accounts receivables, statusing open AR, fixing denials, the patient piece, patient responsibilities, the statements, the patient balances, the credit balances, the on and on. All these things are revenue cycle functions. And so if you think about that, all of those things impact if, when, and how much you're paid. So they're all revenue cycle functions. But the interesting thing about billing is it's the only revenue cycle function, the only that is affected by every other revenue cycle function. If you have a credentialing problem, that affects your biller. If you have a patient registration accuracy problem, it affects your biller. If you have a authorization management problem, it affects your biller. Authorizations is not billing. Okay, it's a revenue cycle function, but it's not billing. Whether you may have a biller that does authorizations, but it's not billing. It's a function to itself. Verification of benefits accuracy, systems, EMRs, PMs, clearinghouses, payers, they all affect your biller. So, since that's true, what is absolutely mind-boggling to me is why I am the only person who's ever created a system to allow the biller to convert their experience into data. Since the biller is affected by everything, we should use the biller to provide data to explain everything. And that is the fundamental difference between what we do, what everyone else does. We've converted the biller into a business intelligence data generator, revenue cycle management, business intelligence data generator, with a few little tweaks to how billers spend their day that in total might be a 5 to 10 minute time investment. We can literally identify everything that's wrong with the revenue cycle. And if you can identify it and measure it, you can fix it. And without being able to identify it and measure it, there's no way you'll ever fix it. Creating balance between billing time demand and billing time supply is all about understanding the drivers of time. Most people are at the level of thinking that volume determines time. I'm here to tell you that yes, volume directly correlates with time. You would think it should take 10 times as long to do 10,000 claims as it takes to do 1,000 claims. And if you run your business and structure your staffing in billing based on that assumption, you will be wrong a very high percentage of the time. I have clients that the 1,000 visit a month client takes 5 times as much time to do billing for them that the 10,000 visit a month client does. You, I'm sure, is thinking that I'm absolutely nuts. But the variance in time on a per claim or normalized basis is entirely determined by the amount of complexity that exists within the volume. And any biller listening to this knows exactly what I'm talking about because they're affected by it every single day. What billers do is they come to work every day and they get into claims and they go through their processes and they encounter countless numbers of things that make their time less efficient than it could be. Yeah. And they scratch their heads and they wonder, why do I encounter these things every single day, day in and day out? Nothing ever changes. Everybody and everyone else in the revenue cycle throws obstacles in my way. It makes it really tough for me to be effective and efficient, which I would really like to be. That's what goes on in a biller's head every single day. And I've just recognized the fact that since they're affected by everything, we actually are in a position to just tweak what they do a little bit so that we can solve these problems to make their job way more effective and efficient. Decomplicate. The focus is in reducing complexity. So remember, billing time demand is a factor of the combination of volume and the complexity in the volume. And if you want to have a totally optimized, fine-tuned, well-run revenue cycle, you need to understand revenue cycle complexity. You need to be a black hole scientist. You have to understand that this mysterious thing that is really hard to see and quantify and measure. But that's where the focus needs to be. The good news is I've already figured out how to do that, solve the problem. So think of your billing team as like a crew team, right? A bunch of people in a little boat rowing for speed and accuracy, right? And they all have to row in the same direction. They all have to put good effort in. They have to work in a synchronized manner. Sequencing matters. There's a pace that matters, right? There's somebody in the boat that's telling them what's the pace. But ultimately, the whole team crosses the finish line or is able to create an outcome in some part dependent on how well they do their job, right? How much effort do they put in? How accurate are they? I mean, down to lots of details. What's the angle of that ore when it hits the water? That pull, the force. I mean, there's so many things, the physics of it, right? But ultimately, that's what you want, a billing team to do, is to be this very, very fine-tuned crew team. Problem is, they didn't build the boat they're rowing in. So if there's structural flaws with the boat, it's not going to be as fast. But even more impactful from that is they don't control the weather. They don't control the water. They don't control almost anything about the condition that they work in. And so you could have the greatest crew team there is rowing in 3-foot chop, and there is no possible way they are going to perform at the same level that they would if they were in smooth water. So maybe a dumb analogy, but this is how it works. What we have to do is really understand what determines the conditions. And what determines the conditions is the complexity, the amount of complexity. And we need to have our revenue cycle strategy and focus in every day on, number one, identifying complexities. Number two, understanding what causes them so that we can prevent them, so that we can maximize the efficiency of the billing process. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to get into metrics a little bit, but the number one most important metric of all is the efficiency of your billing operation, because an inefficient billing operation means there are more objective risks than they can counteract. And then we end up with billing time demand exceeding time supply. And there is no possible way revenue cycle outcomes can be as good as they can be if billing time demand exceeds time supply. You don't want the opposite either. You don't want more supply than you need, because that's just inefficient and you're wasting money. You're overstaffed, right? But so the game is to create optimal conditions, balance between time demand and time supply. And in order to do that, you have to control complexity, not just control it, but reduce it. You need to be just like with our patients, right? We need to look at the root causes of what causes their outcome, their function to be less than it can be, and change at the root causes in order to get a better outcome. So what we do, what I'm going to suggest is, this is what everyone needs to do, right? Is billers do 3 new things. We track time at the task level. So billing workflows, if you look at all of the details of what really are different tasks, there's about 50 different tasks in billing. Now, this is where structure matters, right? So if you have one biller, your biller has to do all 50 tasks. Obviously, we don't structure that way. We structure in a way where the task combinations that one person does are kind of optimal for a role. So they might do 5 tasks or 6 tasks or something like that, or 10 maybe, as would be a lot. We want to optimize the design of the workflow for the person to, as a team, create the best possible chance of having the outcome. So we have to understand time at the task level. We do that to the minute. We also then, since we talked about the experience of the biller, ultimately explaining within that experience is the gold. It is literally the huge value of understanding what's working and what's not. So converting experience into data. So we've built a time and time analytics data platform that allows the biller to convert negative experiences, things that are negative, that are high on the billing time demand side of the equation, into data. That, to capture a scenario that is a problem, to objective risks, to conversion of potential revenue to cash, time it takes, and the efficiency of it, takes about 5 seconds to capture a scenario. So a biller, throughout the course of their day, maybe they bump into 20 things or 10 things or even 50 things if things were really crazy. So multiply by 5 seconds, and that's about the time investment it takes to convert your biller into this tremendously powerful business intelligence, revenue cycle intelligence data generator. And then we have a very efficient way of converting, of capturing productivity counts. How many claims were submitted, how many postings happened, how many open claims needed to be statused or, got done today, or denials that were worked and those things. So this tool enables them to really tell their story through data. And it just goes back to realizing the fundamental business problem, which was huge time variance on a normalized basis that needed to be explained. And so, we found a better way essentially to convert biller time into outcomes. Thomas Edison, again, I love famous people with great, quotes. Thomas Edison said that there's a better way to do it, or there is a way to do it better. Find it. And this is what we've done. We've just realized these relationships between all these things and have come up with a way to quantify it so that we can work on actually changing root cause problems. Okay, so we have converted the biller into an intelligence data generator. It's a very efficient process to extract this kind of data from the biller, a series of 5-second time investments, and you can change everything. So I'm going to share a little bit about some of the data that we know, just super high level. And again, future episodes, I'm going to get into a lot of detail about these things. But we have millions of claims worth of data that we've qualified or quantified all of the things that happen that create billing time demand to exceed billing time supply. So we've come up with a way to quantify those complexities, and they are structural in nature and they're operational in nature. And I'll explain again, future episodes, I'll talk about the structures that cause complexity, the operational execution on things that create complexity. But for now, just understand that, we have millions of claims worth of data. We quantify about 270 to 280 different sources of complexity. I'll give you quick, simple examples. You registered a patient and they had a secondary insurance, but you didn't get it. You got the primary, you didn't get the secondary. Or you got both the primary and the secondary, but you put the secondary in as primary in the EMR. Or you started to treat a patient and they don't even have benefits anymore. Or there was a simple address error, or you had a new therapist who wasn't credentialed with a payer yet, treat your patient that you're never going to get paid for. On and on and on. 275 of these things that the biller can easily say happened. So across all that data, and we've been tracking time to the minute on 50 different billing tasks now for about 7 years. So we can correlate the complexities that happen with the time in order to try and have as close to a constant outcome as we can. 78% of all complexities which create billing time demand inflation, 78% come from functions internal to the practice, external to billing. That is in itself, that one factual data point is the justification for saying we really need to understand the business we're in. We're revenue cycle businesses that do a professional service with our time for revenue, because the problems that create risk to our objectives, risk to getting paid 100%, getting paid quickly, and getting paid cost effectively, 78% are from those functions that affect the biller, but not the biller themselves. Credentialing, auth management, VOB, patient registration, clinical documentation, quality, the systems you're in, the softwares. I'll have a whole episode around industry softwares and their contribution to efficiency or inefficiency. And let me tell you that it is absolutely crazy how poor some of these practice management systems are at creating efficiency in billing process, how poor they are at creating data versus others that are really good at it. They're actually facilitating billers. And one big problem is the practice world is focused on the EMR and how easy is it to do clinical documentation, which should be super important. No focus on the back end, and the back end can completely ruin your business. So systems contributions, payer mixes, all these things. So 78% comes from inside the practice, outside of billing. 14% are payer created complexities, and about a little over 7% are from the systems themselves. I can tell you the number one, if you surveyed a whole bunch of healthcare business owners and said, well, what's your biggest headache around getting paid? They'll tell you it's the payer. First, they'll say it's billing. Second, they'll say it's the payer. Well, neither of those. They're not even hitting the room that has the wall that has the dartboard on it. They're that far off target on understanding what really is in the way of them having the kind of business that they want to have. So 78%. Now, these problems are not all created equal in terms of their ability to inflate time and create imbalance between time demand and time supply. But the biggest billing function by far that's affected by complexities is managing accounts receivables. So you can almost always know whether you're out of balance between time demand and time supply based on what's the condition of your AR. I'm going to do an entire episode on understanding AR, quantifying AR. We have metrics that no one else has, ADO scores, and the way that we qualify the condition of AR. AR follow-up scores and just all kinds of things different. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But the accounts receivables part of the process is the most impacted by complexities. Denial management within accounts receivables management is also the most affected part. If we look at complexities and normalize complexities, which we do, we quantify them, normalize them based on volume. So we have a metric called objective risk per 100 visits per month. And this one metric enables me to compare the quality of the revenue cycles from one practice to another, whether you're a 500 visit a month practice or a 20,000 visit a month practice. We have norms and benchmarks on every single process and function that exists in the revenue cycle. But if I take our best, most optimized clients and compare them to our worst, least optimized clients, okay, think best patient, worst patient, I'll quantify that for you. A very optimized practice is one which creates objective risks at a rate of less than 5% of their claims. A very poorly optimized practice is one that creates objective risks in over half of their claims. When we compare the amount of accounts receivables denial management time on a normalized basis, that means per claim, from our most optimized, least complicated clients to our most complicated, least optimized clients, the time variance in accounts receivables denial management is 4,060% per visit. That's 40x. What business, what process, what anything can you successfully perform and manage when the variance that's out of your control could affect your time by as much as 40 times? The answer is none. The only solution is to reduce the complexities that ultimately inflate billing time demand. So we're going to get into all kinds of stuff like that, as we go. So I'm going to kind of, again, just so quickly understanding my world. So I have two companies. One is a revenue cycle management company. People outsource their billing to us. We use this proprietary data platform. We call it Practice Data Solutions, which I created in a separate company called Ascend Solutions. So we have Revenue Cycle Solutions, we have Ascend Solutions. Ascend is the technology data company. Ascend is not an EMR, it's not a billing platform. It's specialty agnostic, it's systems agnostic. It's a platform designed and intended to convert your revenue cycle functions into data. We started with just the billing piece. Now we're moving off into quantifying complexities and time demand variables for patient registration, verification of benefits, authorization, even clinical documentation. So this is a time and time analytics data platform. So I set that up in a separate company. The focus for our services company, Revenue Cycle Solutions, is on helping primarily physical therapy and occupational therapy practices, accomplish their revenue cycle objectives. My purpose for being in that business is to help them have better businesses, not just do their billing. Ascend Solutions is about a infrastructure, a data platform that everyone in a revenue cycle business needs, regardless of your specialty. So Ascend Solutions is focused on a healthcare-wide support through data and other technologies. We're also working on automations with AI, with RPA, other things. Anyway, that's all going to be different topics, as we go. So the future episodes that would be coming up here. So we're going to talk about a lot of these things I've mentioned in great detail. Some of these episodes will be with other subject matter experts. I'll bring in people. I've already done about 10 of these, but we're going to have experts in marketing, healthcare, and we're going to connect the dots between revenue cycle complexity and how it affects marketing. Because ultimately, the amount of complexity in your revenue cycle determines your financial success and your scalability. And there's no worse thing you can do to a unscalable business than try to scale it. You need to have an understanding of what creates scalability in your business, and it is your revenue cycle outcome. I have experts in artificial intelligence and automations and what's coming in healthcare with respect to that. Maybe we'll even get into data. I've already interviewed a woman who was the senior vice president of data and analytics for Gannett, huge multimedia company, multi-billion dollar. Right now, USA Today is one of their things. So we're going to talk about the importance of data and data analytics and understanding this compliance, not so much from how you treat a patient from a compliance perspective, but your systems, your IT, your access to information, your HIPAA compliance risk, your data protection risks, things like that. So technology risks. Where are things going with software development, integrations with automations and AI and things like that, and some of the strategic partnerships we have with some of the industry or one of the industry software companies, systems and controls, and how you know all this stuff about what's going on in your practice, scaling itself, which is way beyond just marketing. And I'll have clients that we've interviewed who have had a lot of success at implementing all of these things and changing their reality, actually going from not the greatest revenue cycle outcome to amazing revenue cycle outcomes. And they'll tell you what impact that's had on their business, their life, their time, quality of their time, their focus, and ultimately what's the business worth. And so we'll talk about, we'll have guests come in and that I'll interview about all those things. We're going to also really get into this balance between time demand and time supply. We are arriving at today at engineered time supply models based on understanding the complexity variables that exist within your systems and processes. So we'll have episodes on all of these kinds of data points that we have, how we can extract data from what you already do and what you already use in order to understand the relationships of all these things within revenue cycle. We'll have episodes on must-have revenue cycle metrics, ADO score. These probably won't mean anything to you, but we've created these metrics and been tracking these metrics and correlating the moves in these metrics against these time variables now for years. Metrics, these are our metrics, is what we call them. ADO scores. That's ADO meaning average days outstanding in your AR. We score this. We don't just measure the number, we score it. Objective risk per 100 visits per month in all things that create objective risks, whether they're operational issues, they're systems issues, or payer issues, basically anything that inflates billing time demand. We will be looking at your objective risks, the distributions of risks. So we create almost like DNA, what your revenue cycle complexity DNA is. What's it look like? Distributions across all these different functions, how we take these 275 different risks and distribute them around, quantify them within the functions that are responsibility. These literally become the KPIs for every single administrative function that goes on in a healthcare practice. We have payer mix complexity scores. We have CPT coding scores. We have billing process and task level efficiency ratings. We quantify the ceilings in your revenues per visit, your total revenues, your plan of care lengths. We create potential revenue scores, gross values of a new patient, the revenue value, the net values of a patient, your claim break rates, accounts receivables failure rates. We distribute all open claims across responsible functions. And then we have a whole slew of relative metrics, how we compare one metric and how it's moving to another metric and how it's moving. And all this sounds really complicated, but we've built systems to make this easy to produce these metrics. We still have to get better at helping everyone really understand what it all means. But that's the focus today of this constant evolution. We have out-of-network targeting scores for different payers, which is a combination of their poor payment levels and their high complexity, which, is a double whammy. Documentation quality scores, all these metrics that we do and benchmarking for all of it. How do you know it's normal? How do you know how many patient registration errors is good? Because they will happen. There's no perfect. I guarantee you that these things are there. The question is, well, what's a level that does not create out of control billing time demand increase? So, and while all of this came from being a PT and being in the PTRCM business, this is not about just PT. Like I said, it's understanding how revenue cycles work. The objectives are uniform. Doesn't matter what your specialty is, and the problems are uniform, and they're also like pandemic levels. It is really the problem in the business of healthcare is the combination of downward pressure on revenue and upward pressure on cost, because complexity is up, which means time investment is up, which means efficiency is down. And these things can be changed. I tell you, they will never be changed unless you can quantify them first. Anything that's important needs to be measured. And we've just come up with a way to measure the stuff that ultimately determines the success of revenue cycle. Just like you as a clinician come up with ways to do evaluations on your patients and get to what's the root causes of their problems so that you can fix the stuff that's going to last, that's going to stick, that's going to make a difference over their life, right? So in closing, I'm going to give you one quick case study of a client. This is a 9-year case study from 2016 to 2025. So in 2016, it's a physical therapy practice. They did 1,477 visits a month on average. Their average revenue per visit was $75. They did a little over $1.3 million in revenue per year. On average, they broke 23% of their claims. So their revenue cycle complexity was 23 per 100. And we have all the details of how that broke down, but that's the number that matters. At the time that we started them, I charged them 6% to do their billing. Their profit margin was 8%. And you put all that together at today's kind of normal ways of doing business valuations. And I've been in the M&A world and the business valuation world for quite some time. There's not a week that goes by I don't talk to PE firms and understand their valuation methodologies. But this business was worth between $500,000 and $550,000 in 2016. In 2025, we had taken their complexity, the revenue cycle complexity, from 23% down to 4.8%. So that's an 80% reduction in complexity. That complexity reduction created an increase in revenue per visit to $105. Went from 75 to 105. It's a $30 visit increase, 140% increase on a per visit basis, all of which is profit. So their margin went from 8% to 32%. Now that's scalable. It's super hard to scale a very thin margin business. 32% is a great margin for PT, for any service business. The reduction in complexity facilitated an increase in revenue and cash flow on a per visit basis, which created a much higher profit margin, which made them more scalable. They grew to 5,500 visits per month. So their scale increased 372%. They increased to about $7 million in revenue on a 32% margin. I lowered their billing fee from 6% to 4% over that period of time. Why? Because we were much more efficient. We were much more productive. We needed fewer FTEs per visit in a very low complexity condition than it did when it was high complexity. And that's our model. The better the outcome, the lower our fee. So we lowered them down to 4%. The billing cost savings alone on that practice was more than their profit margin in 2016. They saved $140,000 a year in billing fees. And that combination is a business worth $17 million. A 3,342% increase in business valuation from fixing the revenue cycle, from rehabbing the revenue cycle, from going from a broken revenue cycle to an optimized business. And this is why I'm in it. I'm in it to help practice owners really create value in their business, not just do your billing. In fact, I don't care if you outsource. We're an option. We could help you with that. Probably do it better because we have a very innovative, different approach. But if you do billing in-house, you have your own in-house billing team, or you're a revenue cycle business yourselves, a revenue cycle management company that's out there that isn't primarily focused on the physical therapy space, we can help you implement our model, put our data system underneath your operations, and help you convert your task level billing process into this powerful business intelligence, revenue cycle intelligence, data generation machine that allows you to understand what's working, what's not working, to optimize process. Better data leads to better process, which leads to better outcome, which leads to a better business. And that's what we're here to do. And everything that I'm going to do with this podcast and future episodes is going to be about dissecting all of this down to very practical, usable bits of information about specific parts of the revenue cycle, about how to know, how to quantify, how to measure. Whether you have our data platform or not, there's still a lot you can learn about what you do. And it's going to be a combination of me sharing our data-driven, fact-based experience of doing this for decades, and a mix of other outside experts in parts of the industry that's evolving tremendously quickly that will help you understand the business, other things that you need to be aware of. So ultimately, we can get from having a broken revenue cycle that needs to be rehabbed to having an optimized business that's often functioning at much higher levels, creating much more value, and is able to maintain itself in a healthier condition, just like we do as physical therapists. So hopefully you found that interesting, and hopefully you'll check in with me. Our goal is to be putting out an episode every week, and my hope and purpose in this is to just help you have a better business. And it starts with the foundation of better data, and we're going to help you apply that, help you understand it, hopefully be part of your journey to a better place 2, 3, 5 years from now. Thank you for your time.